everyone. Welcome to the Cynthia Linox Show. I am your host, Cynthia Linox, here to remind you that this is your season. This is your season to experience your journey of self discovery. And I am your unapologetic deconstruction coach, here to help you or guide you to deconstruct from everything that no longer serves you. We go through life living this false identity, the identity that's been imposed upon us by society, by, just the experiences we have had in life and based on the influences that we have had. So we grow up being that person that is really not us. And so a journey of self-discovery brings us to a place where we go back and not discover something that's not there. We go back to remember. We go back to acquaint ourselves to that person on the inside. We go back to discover the thing that our true identity, the things we like, the things we don't like, our personality, our gifts, talents, expertise. You are going to discover things that you probably knew on the inside, like really deep down, but because of all the experiences and life situations that's happened, they just, you just lock it up. You just don't pay attention because you don't think, for some of you, you may think that it's too late, you're too advanced in age or whatever, and, it's too late to uh, to pay attention to those desires that you have. But I'm here to tell you that it's not too late. And as we go through this whole journey, you're going to discover that yes, you can. The whole idea is to come to a place where you can be your true, authentic self, to live a life that's organic. Because if you're not living organically, being your true self, then your life is performative. You live performing based on the information that you have, based on the rules, the laws, the regulations, and all those things that society impose upon us. Society, the training we have had, the influence we have had, religious indoctrination, all of those um, external influences shape an identity in each and every one of us. They really shape us into being whatever we turn out to be. And unless we go back to really tap into our true selves, we go through life anxious, frustrated, depressed, sad, not knowing the reason why. So, what we're doing here is addressing the root cause of this whole identity issue, the root cause. Why do we behave the way we do, and how can we change it? How can we get into a place of uh, living organically, being our true self, being able to self express the things that we want, finding the circle of people that identify or resonate with our mindset, finding a community where everyone embrace the richness and the uniqueness of you and celebrate you and not simply tolerate you, but celebrate your uniqueness. Most of it, or I shouldn't say most of it, all of it, all of this whole false identity and the emotions that we go through, all of it has to do with our mindset. Everybody has a mindset. You have a mindset. I have a mindset. Your entire life is governed by your mindset. What is your mindset? Your mindset is a set of belief system that's established in your programming, your computer, a set of belief system, your attitude, and the assumptions that you make of life. And assumptions is not truth. It's just things that you assume. All of that uh, composes your mindset. Now, some people have a fixed mindset and some people have a growth mindset. A fixed mindset is a mindset that says, "This is what I know. I know this to be true. This is what I believe, and I am not changing anything. I am fixed." And if that's you, then this show is not for you, because we're going to talk about the growth mindset. The growth mindset now believes in a lot of possibilities of growth, possibilities of expanding, possibilities of keeping an open mind, possibilities to remain curious, possibilities of learning something new, knowing there are new things to be learned, possibilities to remaining relevant, to be in the know, to know what's happening, new discoveries, scientific discoveries, all those things. A growth mindset keeps your computer moving, keeps the programming regenerating every moment, every moment. Why? Because you have kept your mind open to new information. Wherein, on the other hand, a fixed mindset says, "This is what I know, and I am sticking with this. This is my story, and I'm sticking with this." There are people that are like that, and that's okay. Like my husband and I, we always say, whatever works for you. If it works for you, then that's fine. I'm talking to those of you that are going through this journey of self discovery, trying to get to the root cause, to discover who you are, not just on the surface, but within, underneath, beneath all that you show. What is motivating all of that? What are the influences that drives you? What are the things you like? What are the things you desire? What gives you pleasure? What are the things that catches your eye? What are the things that keeps you awake? The planning, the excitement, the joy, the adventure, the spontaneity. What are those things? You need to know, my friend. You need to know, what are those things. And as you discover what they are, that is going to begin to shape your true identity. You will no longer have to live performing, because your false identity lives a performative life. And that is, you want to be liked, you want to be accepted, you want to be you want to be approved, given permission to, affirm, validated by others. That's just the way it is. You're performing because you want to be liked by others. So you go through life performing instead of being your true authentic self. Why? Because to be your true authentic self, you're going to the question that always comes up is, what are people going to think? What are people going to say about me? What will people think? What will they say? And you have to get over that. You have to get over that whole thing of what will people say? What will people think? Comes a point where it doesn't matter. And you know how I have overcome that? Of course, with experience and so forth. But every time I do something or say something or about to do something, or every time those thoughts come into my mind, if I think of someone in particular, I always think, "Cynthia, would you want to be that person? Would you want to be in their place? Would you want your life to be like theirs? Do you want to be like them?" And invariably, the answer is always no. And because the answer is always no, I'm like, then, whatever they think doesn't matter. It simply doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Just people, because people, sometimes we tend to be so judgmental, to be so critical, and that's all of us. I was walking down the street the other day, and I saw this person, this guy, young guy, and he had pierced all over his face and tattoos all over. And I looked at him, and of course, I made I had a critical thought, judgmental thought. But who cares? That was just my thought. He doesn't know that I thought that. He doesn't care. Obviously, he's fine because he's fine with it. And I would never see him again. And I'm okay with that. So we always have those type of judgment. But there are people now that know you, and sometimes you're concerned with their opinion of you, and that's just the way life is set up. So you need to determine, first of all, what type of mindset do you have? Is your mindset fixed, or is it a growth mindset? Now, I repeat, if you have a fixed mindset, this show is not for you, because you may be shocked or you may be offended, and that's not my intention. My intention is not neither to shock you or to offend you. It's just, it is what it is. So, but for those of you that are going through this journey of self-discovery and uh, deconstructing from things that no longer serve you, because there's so many things that we hang on to. About 2 weeks ago, I shared about going through feng shui in my house and getting rid of things that I've had there for months and sometimes even over a year, and just really cleaning out so that I can have free, fresh flow of energy through my house. Get rid of the old and make room for the new. And that's the same thing that we need to do with our brain. That's why when you keep an open mind, when you keep a growth mindset, your mind, you keep an open mind. Why? Because you're always welcoming information, new experiences, new knowledge. It's like kids, they all have an open, they have a growth mindset. That's why they're always running around, trying, asking questions, touching things, trying to discover things, trying to figure out how this work, and that's. But as we grow older, there's so many influence that comes into our lives, and sometimes we shut it down. We shut it down, and we become fixed, and that simply doesn't work for me, because I am always looking for the new. So what is a mindset? When you talk about mindset, again, it's a set of belief that you have recorded in your mind, a set of beliefs, and in most cases, they're limiting beliefs. They're beliefs that really work against you. They're beliefs that work against you. Limiting belief, your attitude toward life experiences, and the assumptions that you have made about everything, about life, about situations. All of that comprises what your mindset is. And in order to get out of that state of false identity, you have to change it. You have to change the narrative. Now, one thing should really raise your eyebrows is when I talk about limiting beliefs. That, for me, that became something that really made me angry. That just pissed me off. Why? Because when I think of belief, they're not mine. All the beliefs that I had, those were beliefs that were imposed upon me. And when I talk about that, I mean, just things, societal beliefs, and I'm not talking about a social structure. Social structure, we have that so that we can live cohesively in our community, and we can have a cohesive type relationship with the people in our community. So structures. As a matter of fact, this morning I was reading in that in Japan, kids, 5-year-old kids going to school on the subway, on the rail by themselves. And it states that these kids are, that's the way, that's obviously something that's cultural. And the community um, feels responsible, everyone in the community, not just in their neighborhood, in their community, in their state, everyone feels responsible to protect these children. So they take the subway, not the subway, the train, I think is what it is. They take the rail system and they go to school, and and they go. And I thought, that is just crazy. That would never, ever happen here in the West or in Latin America. That just would not happen. That's not the way we are. That's not our culture. But I thought that was quite interesting and admirable, actually, that you could have, because these kids, they're doing They're learning things from a very, very early age to be self-sustained. They know how to use the walk, how to cook, how to do this, and it's anyway, it's something to behold, and I really enjoy kind of learning the different cultures. And as a matter of fact, I mentioned to my husband that we need to really take a trip to Asia because we haven't done that. So that's going to be interesting. Now my curiosity is more piqued because of that information that I got. But anyway, about your mindset. So you have got once you identify that you have a growth mindset, you're going to now have to take steps to change it. Now, some of you have shared that you're going through a funk, you're going through a situation. And some of you, because of your limiting beliefs, and a lot of it has to do with your religious belief, you call it broken, or you're going through a trial or a test, and you're waiting for a breakthrough, and all of those words and expressions that we share. And in most cases, like, because words are simply letters that we assign meaning to. So when you say you were broken, what exactly do you mean by that? Because I know that in my life, years back, I've had some life situations that I've had to overcome, that I had to make decisions, and they were not pretty in terms of, I remember on a couple occasions, several occasions, I lost my job. One place, when because at that during that time in my, when you're young, college, well, after college or whatever, you don't think in terms of having a what do I call it, security blanket, like emergency funds. You don't, at least not me. I didn't think in those terms of having an emergency fund. So when you lose your job, you can lose everything unless you find a job right away. And on two occasions, I had lost my job, and it was tough. Lost my job, lost my car, lost my where I lived, my apartment, and I just lost everything. And I had to pick myself back up. I had to pick myself back up, but that was just life situation. I never, and even then I thought, well, even then I was let me see. On one occasion I wasn't religious, and on the other, I was. What I mean by that, growing up, I did not grow up in a religious household. None of that. We were free to be, and it was. My mom was very. My mom subscribed to I think some kind of Episcopal, but I didn't. We didn't grow up as that. That's just her, a woman that prays, good morals, values, and all that, and so forth. But we went to Catholic schools, and that's because it's what was available as far as the best schools, private school, I should say. And so I didn't grow up in a religious background, but when in my adult life, I became religious, born again. And when that happened, I took on a whole new personality. I was told that I was unworthy, that I was filthy and had no worth, and all of that I was a sinner. So I had that information. Even though I had that information, I didn't really buy into it for some reason. I just rejected that. And that just didn't set with me. Number one, I think I mentioned earlier that growing up, I was in boarding school, and I got kicked out 3 times out of boarding school, and that's because I was mischievous and just really wanted to be me. And that environment, it was a religious environment. A religious, wasn't Catholic. It was a Christian boarding school, and I was just very mischievous. So I think my whole persona, my whole thing about being sovereign and self-governed. It started way back then. I just like that sense of independence because I believe that inherently we have that chip. It's just that it is so suppressed that we don't pay attention to it. But I quickly realized that if you don't pay attention to it, at some point it's going to manifest in certain ways because it will show up either by being anxious or trauma, being depressed, being sad, entertaining pain, suffering, and there's a acute correlation between mind and body. And if those are not in sync, it can create inflammation in your system and then cause sickness, disease, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm very, very much aware of that. But so I read this book, The Science of the Mind by Ernest Holmes, and that's before I became religious. But ever since, it really that and I could not even go back and quote a whole bunch of stuff from the book. It just the message that I got from that book, the information that I got from that book is that everything resides in the mind. Your life is shaped by the thoughts you entertained. And those thoughts are formed by the information you get. And if it's beliefs from someone else, then number one, it's limited because it's limited to someone else's thoughts, opinion, experience, their point of view, limiting beliefs. But yet, we register it because that's what we know. And in most cases, we you can't help it because that's like for me, that was the environment that I was in. I was in a religious environment, and that had the most influence. When I talk about those identity switch from what I was to becoming, because what before I became religious, I never thought of myself as being a sinner. I just never. I I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know. Of course, I went to Catholic school. I got, baptized and confirmed and first communion and all that. And they talk about sin, venial sin and all different kind of sin. But they never really address you as a sinner. So I never thought of myself as that. They never even touched my worth, that I wasn't worthy. I didn't know anything about that. But then I came into this uh this circle, and that's what I was told. So I had that stored in a file. I didn't submit to it totally. When I was in corporate America, I had a very responsible job, so I couldn't think of myself as that. So I guess my personality was dual personality. It doesn't matter, but I didn't really buy into that. And it's interesting because I when I was in religion, I taught in Bible school, intimacy with the Father, but for some reason, and again, I don't all that whole religious thing. I don't subscribe to that anymore. But I had my own thoughts and my own ideas of that according to the Bible. I was never afraid of hell, and heaven was a place that I really didn't want to go to, but I couldn't share that with anyone because that would be against the grain. I always thought of that. I always thought that would be so boring. That just didn't fit into my personality. It just didn't fit into the real me. It's like, go to heaven to do what? And I used to have these conversations with the God of the Bible, the God that in my mind, again, that imaginary God that I created. And I used to say, no, that's not me. I don't want to go to heaven to do what? Personally, I think worship, praise, that's unnatural. Those are the conversations that I used to have with the God of the Bible. That's unnatural. For me, it's not natural. But I used to be performative. I used to go to church. I used to praise. But in my own personal time, I used to say, no, that's not. I wasn't afraid of hell, but I didn't want to go to heaven, and so I was just there, and I was fine. But I was told you're a sinner, you're this, that, the other, and all that kind of stuff. The point is this: if you're going through that now, and you are, because some of you are saying uh, that you're broken, you are broken, you are going through a trial, you're going through a test. First of all, you need to identify what that is. What does that mean to you? Is it something that you were taught, or is it something that you just know? What is a test? A test of what? Who is administering the test? And why are you being tried? Did you commit a crime? Sin is an offense to the commandments. That's what sin is defined as. Well, you have what? 613 commandments. 613, not 10, 613. Look it up. So when you say you are broken, define that. What exactly does that mean? What does that mean to you? Is it a life situation? When I lost my car, I didn't have a car. Imagine, and to see where I live, you need a car. But I had good friends, and they would have me use their car, drop them off at their office, and I would have the car. Then I go pick them up. That's the freedom, the liberty, and I was fortunate to have good friends. But it was just life situation. After a while, I got a car. I got a job, because I lost my car, got a job and I got a car. So because you're going through a situation like you called it broken, who's told you that? How do you define that? We define things differently. We define things differently. It's like I was with some friends the other day, and we were talking. We had a really good simulating conversation. And I said something about the purpose of life is pleasure. And Brian looked at me like, what? You know, he said, what? I said, yeah. I said, the purpose of life is pleasure. And I said, well, you could define what that means to you, but that's what it means to me. And he's like, what do you mean by that? Now, we can, we could assume a whole bunch of stuff. Remember, I told you a mindset based on assumptions, beliefs, and one's attitude. And I said pleasure. Pleasure, of course, fun, adventure, and all that. But I said, let me just tell you an experience I just had, which is just a few days ago, last week, as a matter of fact. I was in the store, I was in the grocery store, and I'm standing here. In front of me, there's this guy, and then at the register, there is this older lady. The cashier checked her stuff, and she runs her card, and it declined. She runs it again, it declined. She runs it again. They went through this like 4 times, it declined. So she asked the cashier to hold her basket of groceries. There, of course, she had to cancel all the transaction, and she was, I guess, going to customer service to find out I don't know what. I was just standing there observing the whole thing. And so the guy that was in front of me, he was getting a little impatient. So the older woman with the card went to customer service. She went someplace. I'm assuming customer service. The guy was in front of me. She checked him out. And by the time she was finished with the guy, this older lady came back. The guy in the middle, he left, paid for his stuff, and he left. And so the woman came back with the card, and she asked her to run her groceries again. She's so apologetic to me because all this is wasting a lot of time and whatever, or taking up a lot of time. So I said, no, I said, I'm good. So the cashier checked her stuff all over again. And, came up to the amount. She ran her card. It declines again. She runs the card again. It declines. And I said, let me just kind of try it, because sometimes you have to do it like fast. You have to slide it, swipe it fast. So I took her card and I swiped it fast and declined. And I flipped it over for some reason. You can't flip it. The bar has to be the barcode. The magnetic strip has to be at a certain position. But I flipped it over, ran it, declined. Did it 4 times, it declined. So I said to the cashier, I said, you know what? I said, that's fine. I said, let me use my debit card. So I used my debit card and paid for her groceries. Now she lost it. The woman lost it. When I say that, she just looked at me. She just couldn't believe it. Her eyes, she's tearing up and stuff like that. And for me, that was pleasure. I was that gave me pleasure that I was able to do that. It was not even like a second thought. It was not even like had our card gone through, I wouldn't have insisted on doing it, but it's just because it just happened. And that gave me pleasure. So whether you call it selfish, that gave me pleasure. So when I say the purpose of life is pleasure, that is what I mean. Not just that, fun, adventure, friends, socializing, all of that brings me pleasure. Because if I think the opposite, then like some people say, well, you can't know what pleasure is unless you go through pain and suffering. That's not my mindset. If I have a situation that sets me back, then I deal with it and I try to resolve it. But it's not, I don't think, well, life is a balance of pain and pleasure. That may be true, but that's not the way I am going to program it in my mind. I'm going to program my chip, my computer is going to be programmed with pure pleasure. And when something happens, then I deal with it. That works for me. You need to find out what works for you. So when I say broken, again, you saw I define what pleasure means to me, what it means to me. And that works for me. If I saw that woman again, I would not be able to identify her at all because it wasn't it wasn't about her. It was about what it did to me, the pleasure it brought to me to be able to do that for someone else. It could have been anyone. It could have been anyone. And fortunately, I don't have any kind of racial bias. In those terms, it was just somebody in need. And if you're able to do it, then you do it. It's that simple. So when you say you are broken, how are you defining that? What does that mean? What is that? Is it because you've lost your job or you've lost your business? What is it? Why are you what does that mean? Because in life things happen. Things happen in life. A few years ago I went roller skating. Now I know how to roller skate. And I, made a bad move and fell and tore up my ankle. My foot tore it up into pieces. Bad. I wasn't being tested or trial or being broken. No, it broke my ankle. And in 8 weeks, like the surgeon said, you'll be able to skate in 8 weeks. And he was correct. That's just things that happen in life. Things happen. So you need to program, my friend, your mindset with a new set of information. If you think, I know when I was in that religious circle, I used to say things like anything good that happened to me, it would, God would get the credit, and anything bad that happened, the devil would be blamed. There, again, that whole mindset is not part of my lifestyle now, or even it's not registered in my mindset. But I would say things like, without God, I can do nothing. If it wasn't for God, this wouldn't happen. Or, if it's something bad, I would say, I bind you, devil, and I bind you, and I plead the blood, and all that kind of stuff. I did all of that for naught. I mean, that just for nothing. And once I learned the truth, once I came into that place of knowing who I am, because you have to know who you are. You have to know who you are, um, at a cellular level, not just surface, at a cellular level. You need to know who you are, what makes you tick. You need to know you, not believe that you're this and believe that you're that. And I have walked this truth. Well, I was going to say 16 years, but even before I came into religion, my life was just, it was great. It was just stuff happened, but that's just life. You need to know who you are and not live by performance, by the status quo, by uh, on autopilot. You have to know who you are to such in such a way that you exude that confidence, that assertiveness. I was talking to this, well, there was this couple, okay, and there was a conversation that ensued and so forth, and I got to a place where I was able to pour in encouragement and validation and affirming them in their situation, the business, and so forth, and really admiring the accomplishment and things like that, and it was great because I saw after they shared with me, and I was just pouring into to them all of that encouragement, affirmation, and so forth. And then the whole idea was, I don't know that they have had anyone that has seen them in that light, like that, or at least, and then shared with them. So he said, "You are a woman of substance, a woman to be reckoned with." And I paused and I smiled and I said, "Thank you. You have discerned correctly." And he looks, he says, "Oh, wow, okay." He said, "No shadow of humility?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "That response is pretty unique." I said, "Well, I agree with you." He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, what else should I have said?" I said, "Yeah, I agree with you. I'm a woman of substance and a woman to be reckoned with. I agree with you. You're correct. You have discerned correctly." He said, "Well, that's a different twist." And I said, "Well, it's not a twist. It's just the truth that I know about me." And then she said, "Wow, I'm always learning something from you. I learned something new." Now, the norm would have been, "Thank you. I'm so humble that you have said that." But that's not me. That's not me. That means nothing to me. That would have been the status quo. That would have been uh traditional response. That would have been based on the ideology. I know when I was religious, there's a statement, a scripture that says that you must decrease that he may increase, and so forth. So if I thought about that, then I would have said, well, and try to play small, try to play it down, try to minimize the way that person saw me. Why should I do that? Why do you do that? Why do you play small? Why do you minimize your efforts, your skills, expertise, your talent? Why do you play small? Why is it? Now, if it's because of religious indoctrination, then you may need to revisit that and make your choice. I'm not telling you what to do. I just discovered something that works for me. The truth that works for me, that set me free from that whole narrative and that whole ideology. I would never say that. Or, I mean, I hate to use the word never, but that's just not me. That doesn't, for me to say, oh, I'm so humble that you say, you see it when they have the Grammy Awards and the Emmy Awards, and they get the trophy and they go up there and they say, I'm so humble that God would, the things that I have accomplished have been, you know uh, and again, this may shock you, but yes, when you come to know who you are, you begin to recognize, realize, and to know that your worth, your value, that you are worthy. And if you serve a God, and the reason I say a God is because, there are many, there are over 18,000. And I don't want to assume that, my audience is just from an Abrahamic mindset. If you worship a God, you have to understand, and you have to know, and you have to know that God would favor you and would want the best for you and would want you to grow and flourish. Think about your kids. That's what you want for your kids. That's what you want for your children, for them to become independent and to be on their own. And when your son buys his house, you tell all your friends that he finished with Harvard or Princeton or Baruch, whatever college, Oxford, and he's now working at this firm, or he opened his own business, and now he bought this mansion over there in this part of the community, and you feel proud. You feel proud to tell your friends of the accomplishment of your son, of your children. You have to keep in mind that if you serve a God, that they would want that for you. That's why, for me, now that I'm away, when you're in the pot, you're part of the stew. You're hot. You don't know what's going on the outside. It's not until you come outside that you realize, oh my gosh, how did I even think that? How did I believe that? Why did I even, why was that even part of? But that's what I knew. That's what I believed for years, almost 3 decades. Almost 3 decades that I, you know, was part of that thing. And that's what I believe. And after I left religion, and I keep sharing this because when it's your story and you repeat it over and over and over, it not only is it going to help you, but it just something to you. It's like a reminder. That's how I used to think. That I'm based on the information that was fed to me. Come to find out, that's somebody else's narrative. That's the way they saw life. So you have to think that you're favored by whatever God you serve. You're favored by that God, and that you are able to. And if you have a situation, use your mind, use your ability, your thinking to go out and move and ask questions. And when I didn't have a car, I had friends, and they were more than willing to have me use their cars, and I was able to use their car, drop them off at work, come back, and go someplace, have dinner or whatever, then go to Brahms and have some ice cream or something. We used to have fun. For me, it was not a burden. It was just a setback. Why? Because of my attitude toward life. Remember, your mindset is made up of your beliefs, your attitudes, and your assumption. Now, I assume I knew that I would get a job. And once I got a new job, of course I had to get it. Back then I never thought in terms of having an emergency fund. So, when you lose your job, it's like kind of like either you get a job right away, or if you didn't, then you had some issues to deal with. Well, I had issues to deal with, and you just deal with it. Yeah, when you're going through it, it doesn't feel good. But I didn't call myself broken or think that I was going through a trial, even though I was religious or being tested. Why? The way to change your mindset, my friend, because you're going to have to change your mindset. First of all, you have to identify, recognize, acknowledge that you have a growth mindset, that you're open minded and ready to grow, ready to learn, ready to engage in new dialogue, even with yourself, receive new information in your computer, your mindset. You need a new programming. You need to get rid of the old and embrace the new. Get rid of the old mindset. Get rid of all the stuff that are new. It's not easy, especially if you have situations and things that, experiences that's been ingrained in you in your upbringing. That is not easy, but it's necessary. It all depends on the life that you want to live now. It all depends on what you want for yourself now. Now, if you think you can't, then you can't. You won't. But if you think, yeah, I can do that, and I am going to do that, because I'm telling you, you don't have much time. Every minute the clock is ticking, and life awaits you. The universe favors you. The universe wants to bestow upon you based on the information that you put into your mind. The universe favors you. And if you subscribe to a God, you have to believe that your God would want good for you, and get rid of all the fear, because religion, at least the one I subscribed to, which was part of the Abrahamic teaching, God, I should say, was all fear based, hellfire and brimstone, and then you live today for an afterlife. Well, as I mentioned earlier, I was not interested. I knew I wasn't going to hell, and I knew I didn't want to go to heaven. That's not my makeup. That is not my thing. To me, it was too boring, and I just need a little more flavor. I need a little more salt. And based on what's described, I didn't want that, and I knew enough that is. I don't even call it a secret. That is something that I just kept to myself when I was in this whole religious circle, because I can share that. I can share that with anyone. That would be so against the grain. But I used to think it. It's like, what else? They said, you worship God day and night. To me, that is unnatural. It is unnatural to worship anyone. So I had to deal with that. But I just, whatever. There was no fear to that extent. I had no fear. I had no fear, but it was just a lifestyle that I had, religious. And that was 16 years ago, not anymore. No, it's totally different. So I'm going to encourage you to do this. I said, you first have to identify your current mindset. And for those of you that are watching, I mentioned earlier, if you have a fixed mindset, then you may not garner from this what I'm sharing. But if you have a growth mindset, then this is for you. First, you have to educate yourself. You have to come into the know. Regardless of what it is you want, you need to know the truth. And when the student is ready, the teacher shows up. You're going to have to educate yourself. You're going to have to challenge your beliefs. You're going to have to challenge, you're going to have to ask questions, question the validity of negative belief. All those things uh, that concerns you and brings fear and apprehension and all of that. And you need to empower yourself, affirming yourself in the truth as you learn it. Affirming yourself. You empower yourself. You empower yourself. You have to practice self-awareness. Practice self monitor your thoughts regularly. Sometimes, and don't get me wrong, sometimes I have negative thoughts or scary thoughts that just run by my mind, but I identify them like that. I am so watchful because I know the power of my thoughts. I am so watchful, and I get rid of them. I replace them with the things that I desire. And you can do that. That's easy. The fun part of this is that you own the hardware system. You own it. It is yours. It is yours. You own it. But you also own the programming. You own the programming. The hardware is there. Now, you determine if it's fixed or if it's growth. So yours is a growth mindset. But then the programming, it's the thoughts that goes through your mind. You've got to adopt a learning attitude. Be curious, keep an open mind, and anything that you question, educate yourself on it. Consistent practice, yeah, by repetition. Keep doing it over and over and over. Remember, it's your mindset. Be patient and persistent. Be patient and persistent, but you can accelerate it. Of course, you can. Once you determine, but when you start, you have to get rid of the concerns of what would people think. You may have to change your circle. You may have to change your environment. You may have to change the influences that are around you, because if you have a lot of people that are toxic, or people that when I hear somebody, when I'm out, and I have a lot of friends that are Christian. I have a lot of friends that are Christian, and one thing I have learned to do is to respect them. But I don't. That's just not part of my makeup. But whenever they say something like, "Without God, I can do nothing. It is God." I just listen. I don't agree, and they would say, "Right? No, I don't agree, because that's just not the belief system that I have." So you have to determine. You may have to change your circle. Now, I also have friends that they understand their abilities and their strengths, their skills, and so forth, and they understand the self, moi, the self. You need to know thyself and know your ability, and not be afraid to take credit, and to walk in your strength, to be empowered by the knowledge you have. That's why you must educate yourself. You have got to educate yourself and continue to challenge the belief, challenge any limiting belief, challenge your belief system. If you continue to live your life based on belief system, yes, you will think that you are broken when something happens. And when you think that way, what happens is that you reach you become desperate, and your thinking gets skewed. You can't think clearly. You don't have clarity. When I've been on a hiatus for about 4 months, since January. We came back from a long vacation for the Christmas holiday, and for some reason I've just determined that I need a pause in my life from a lot of social activities, networking situations and so forth. So I took a pause. And I cannot tell you that I have grown exponentially. The things that I have learned about me, about my goals, my business, I have, the ideas that, clarity has come to light for me. But I knew that, no, I'm gonna just pause. And I allow all of that, my friend, is self-care. Why? I know me. I needed to take a pause. It doesn't matter what anyone says. I don't, whatever anyone thinks or say, that's irrelevant to my purpose. Once you know you, then you feel free to make decisions for you, for yourself. See how that is? So practice self-awareness. And all those things that you desire, sometimes when we're doing a mindset shift, some coaches or teachers or whatever may say, write down all the things that you are hindered by, that you're afraid of, all the things, the bad stuff. That's not my style. My style is, let's focus on what you want. Let's now, if you have trauma, you may need to see a professional. You know, sometimes, people with, you know, PTSD may need, but if it's just life situations, I'm telling you, be bold and level up, and don't think that stop minimizing yourself and playing small and downplaying who you are. But once you know and feel and know that you are empowered to create, it makes you feel assertive and confident. It's like this person saying to me, "You are a woman of substance." Well, yeah, a woman to be reckoned with. All I said was, "Thank you. You have discerned correctly." And they were shocked. What was I going to say? Well, no. And you know what? That response helped me. Now, I perhaps wouldn't say that to just anyone, but I knew that I took some time pouring into them encouragement, affirmation, and things of that nature. So, yeah, they elicit that response out of me. What was I going to say? Well, that's just me. No, no, no. My friend, you have to level up. You must level up your game, level up your game, the way you see yourself, the way you perceive yourself, the way you know yourself to be, with confidence, and be assertive and be bodacious and express yourself. Once you are comfortable with that, it sends a whole message to everyone else. But you have to be comfortable with who you are. So focus on the positive, stay optimistic, and know that your growth mindset will grow exponentially as you feed it with a new set of information. I'm going to leave you with that, my friend, so that you can sup on that. So that you can sup on that. Process it, unpack it, and know that you can assign meaning to anything. Just like I assign meaning to pleasure. I got pleasure in doing what I did for that. And there's so many experiences that I have that brings me pleasure. You can determine what it means for you. That may not, if you say the purpose of my life is to help each other, to help others, I can agree with that, because that's why I'm here with you now. Anyway, every Thursday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, we have a date right here. And if you can't meet me here, then you see the icons over here. Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. You could pick up the show 24/7, and and you won't miss any at all. In the meantime, also, if you need to drop me a note, look at the right here, the scrolling marquee right here, info at thecynthialinoxshow.com. You can drop me a note and I will respond to you, and whatever we need to do, we'll take it from there. In the meantime, you have a fantastic weekend, whatever you choose to do. Have a great weekend. Enjoy yourself and stay safe in whatever you do. Okay? Ciao, amigos. See you then. Au revoir. Hasta luego. Hasta luego.